Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird. And if that mockingbird won't sing, Mama's gonna buy you a diamond ring. We all dead.
This is West Coast Sasquatch Research. And on this happy Halloween Eve, we have the Bukwas Crew. I can't even speak. The Bukwas Crew together again. We have the handsome Thomas Steenberg, the super intelligent and handsome Bill Reed, and you got me. And so we're going to discuss Halloween tonight on a Bigfoot kind of slant to see if, there's any kind of a comparison of topics between witches and goblins and things that go bump in the night and your furry forest denizens. And I'd like to go attack the psychology of this whole thing first. As a kid, does participating in Halloween, and the pursuit of Sasquatch later on in life as an adult, does that stimulate some of the same needs that we have? Are they both kindred to each other? I'm just putting it out there. I don't know. No. The center.
Halloween, ghosts, ghouls, and creepy things, and of course, the men without bones are just fun little stories, whereas the Sasquatch is a zoological mystery that needs to be solved.
Yeah, but isn't the Sasquatch just another version of an adult boogeyman?
Maybe to the weird and wonderful and the inmates running the asylum, yes, but to me, no.
So I'm one of the inmates in the asylum then, because I did, not surprisingly, I disagree with Thomas on this point. I I think when you go back far enough, especially if you're talking about childhood, it's the mystery. When you're a kid, whether it's ghosts, goblins, the overall joy of Halloween, you're looking at the unknown. The could have beens, what might be out there, what could be out there, and there's that little bit of scaring you, like is that old lady that lives alone at the end of the street, is she really a witch? Do I have to worry about what candy she gives us? And then the monster in the woods, the wild man legends, and a lot of, when you go back, the modern Sasquatch, it goes back to wild man legends found throughout the world that can be equated to what we think of Sasquatch now, and other wild man legends that are not the same as Sasquatch, but still that legend. And I think when you're a kid with Halloween, it's that little bit of, you have the relative safety of your neighborhood with that little bit of fear factor of the ghosts and goblins. And for some people, they have that in the woods, that little bit of fear factor. Or it's also with that when you're a kid, you're exploring your world, and that includes the supernatural, what's real, what's not. And when you become an adult, if you're a Sasquatch researcher, like for me, I don't care whether the Sasquatch exists or doesn't exist. What's important to me is the question. And I think that curiosity that you have as a kid for things that go bump in the night, and that curiosity to find out if Sasquatch exists, I think they're related. They're not quite the same, but I think there is a relationship there.
I think that I'm leaning more towards an embedded curiosity between a child and the adult. I mean, who didn't enjoy famous monsters of Filmland when the magazine came out, and putting together plastic Aurora models from Universal Studios. I built every one of them, but I'm not sure about the Invisible Man, as I could never find him. But I know I built every one of them, and I had a lot of fun too.
I had three of them. I had Dracula, which is the classic Bela Lugosi poem.
Oh yeah, yep.
Of Boris Karloff with Frankenstein monster, and of course the Lon Chaney's Wolfman. The thing I remember most is I always had to repair them at least once a week, because every time my mother vacuumed my bedroom, she'd obviously hit my bookshelf and they'd come tumbling down.
I don't forget, and the creature from the Black Lagoon. Yeah.
Never got that one. I only had the three. But
you don't know what you're missing, man.
Yeah.
But I mean, Frankenstein, the werewolf, and Dracula were the top three. Everyone knew that. But okay. So, does the interest in Sasquatch? I think you really answered this, Bill. Does the interest of Sasquatch become an adult version of gluing monster models together and reading horror magazines and watching bad movies?
I look at it this way. I never went out to prove that vampires, or I had to wonder that vampires were real or not, or werewolves or anything like that. But the Sasquatch to me is just whether or not there's another animal out there. So I never but spiritually, I guess, and emotionally, you could say there are similarities.
Yeah. I know. I get you. I wasn't
I never
talking.
thought of it that way, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's once again, so we started to simplify complex answers a lot. And I think with Sasquatch, and again, I think it's on the, with the individual. I mean, there's some individuals that, and I'm part of it as well, that look at it from a scientific, taxonomical point of view. Is there an undiscovered creature out there? So you can have that scientific curiosity. You can also have people, like when I was growing up, I loved mythology. I studied the mythologies all over the world. Yeah. So, you can look at it as Sasquatch from the mythological standpoint. So I think a well-rounded researcher, or somebody that's well-rounded in their wanting to find out, investigate Sasquatch, you have to have that scientific curiosity. You have to have a bit of that, cultural anthropology, studying the mythology, and then that childlike things that go bump in the night. I think it's a combination. I don't think it's one thing. I think if it was just one thing, you'd probably get bored of it fairly quickly, or you'd be a fairly one-dimensional person.
Could it be just a part of our society in which we live? Is it a mindset, a North American mindset? Halloween, Sasquatch. I mean, most Sasquatch are reported in North America, some in Mexico. A mindset for North Americans who've been steeped in horror films and fascination with the paranormal and the occult and everything, like nowhere else in the world. Are those two related at all to each other? I mean, if you look at Halloween is observed in North America. Of course, Mexico got its Day of the Dead. The British Isles. That's it. That's pretty well it. You know, the Celtic background.
Tell you honest truth, Halloween is a recent arrival in the British Isles.
Mm-hmm.
They never used to do that. Like before the 1990s, they never ever really recognized Halloween or had Halloween in the United Kingdom because it was so close to Guy Fawkes Day.
Yeah.
Remember the 5th of November, right? But it became popular through the media and, of course, Hollywood. And, of course, we have our ongoing debate: did Halloween really start in the United States, or did it start in Canada and went to the United States? You know,
I think it started mainly in the British Isles, because this is sort of an offshoot of Celtic
stuff from Ireland, actually.
Well, Celtic is the British Isles. Like France doesn't have Halloween. They never have had Halloween, and they don't till this day. And many other countries don't have Halloween. But I was comparing that. Okay, the countries that do have Halloween have a heck of a lot more sightings of Sasquatch than countries that don't. I'm just trying to see if there's any.
You could say Transylvania never had Halloween either, but every day is Halloween.
Yeah, but I think we're narrowing our scope too much. I mean, I personally don't think Halloween itself has any connection with Sasquatch sightings. I think some of the base level curiosity is common between them. But if you go to other parts of the world, I mean, you have the Yowie, you have the Almasty, you have the Yeti. And in many of these other that don't have a history of Sasquatch-like creatures, then they might have other creatures, whether it's werewolves or vampires or whatever. I mean, there's wild man of the woods legends are throughout the world, and I think we do ourselves a disservice when we try to compare apples to apples across the world, when sometimes it's apples to oranges is the proper comparison. And I know, like in and you also have to look at it from a cultural thing. In some cultures, especially like in some areas of South America, that where they're deeply superstitious, they may not have one central boogeyman type. They may have numbers. Like I had a friend that came from Peru that absolutely 100% believed in the Haitian type, witchcraft type zombies, believed in curses. He 100% believed that he had a cousin that was killed by a curse from a local sorcerer from where he lived. So I think we narrow it down too much. I think it's nice to say we have the same curiosity as a kid that leads us to go down that path, but a direct connection between Sasquatch and Halloween, I think it's tenuous at best.
Yeah, I think other than people who are camping around Halloween time and telling stories around the fire, there's probably a Sasquatch story too thrown in with the men without bones and other things. But other than that, no. As a matter of fact, when someone reports something within Halloween itself or 2 days before or just after, I kind of keep that in the back of my mind as, okay, Halloween's here. Is this guy trying to make up something because it's Halloween time? And I've had that happen in the past. Yeah.
But I think what makes, like, I'm in my 50s. I enjoy Halloween. I think part of my personality that makes me enjoy Halloween is probably shares a lot of the core reasons and why I'm interested in Sasquatch. Mm-hmm. So I think our personalities are what does it. But I think, as viewership, I don't know. I think they're sort of different.
Well, I guess my question sort of is, why is there such a love, such an investment, such acknowledgement of Sasquatch in North America when it's not like that anywhere else in the world?
I think there's two things that really do it. with the exception of, the Soviet Union and Siberia,
Mm-hmm.
the large, the best thing about Canada is that there's nobody here. And nowhere, when you talk about in North America, we have huge areas of boreal forest. The state of Alaska, if it was a country, would be the 16th largest country in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It would be, the third biggest province in Canada if it was one of our provinces. So when you're looking at the size we have, it makes it just ripe for something in the forest. So then you look at, okay, what are you going to make in the forest? So maybe in a place like South America, they might have 90-foot anacondas that are in the forest, or they might have, the giant spiders, or, their megatherium still running around. Well, here we have to have something that would be in a forest. Myth would make it more anthropological. So we could have people, in some areas they might think of the cave bear. But really, when you look at here with the fossils, or sorry, not the fossils, the forests, and then in 1967, we had the PGF, and whether you believe the PGF is real, fake, or you sit on the fence of it, that has become the focal point of Sasquatch research in North America. Everyone our age, when you were a kid, you probably saw In Search Of when they had it on there. You probably saw the BBC special. Every time you saw a show on mysteries or monsters, it was the PGF. So that was being programmed into, for at least 54 years. We've had
Yeah.
the PGF programmed into it. So it only makes sense that that's what people think of. Like in Scotland, their biggest cryptid is Loch Ness. And really what started with that, you could go back to the surgeon's photo. I mean, they had stories before that, but the surgeon's photo became that one photo that in every book on cryptids you see, in every show you saw, and that made Nessie sort of the de facto cryptid of Scotland, because it was out there in television. Prior to 50 years ago, we really, radio was the big mass media thing. But since you've had TV, which has come up with our generation, when the first images we saw for possible real life monsters has been the PGF.
The PGF, yeah. And you're right, the surgeon's photo, and I would say the Dinsdale footage about 3 years after that for Loch Ness, Ogopogo the Folding film of 1967. That's the one you always saw over and over and over again.
And I think, unlike the Ogopogo, which is really a regional thing for most of us, but I think when it comes to the PGF, there is probably the PGF and the surgeon's photo are probably, in the world of cryptozoology, the most shown on TV of anything. And I think when you have, and the PGF has been shown all over the world. If there's a TV, you've probably seen that picture. And I think that's why it's become so culturally ingrained in North America, is it came along at the right time when, TV was first becoming a big thing.
Well,
and
if they couldn't show the film, you'd always see the still 352.
Well, I must admit that it's not the PG film per se itself that attracted me to this a number of years ago. In a way, it was, though, because with me, I never saw the film. I just saw the Argosy magazine that first ran the story. I found it in a wood box at a cabin. And I sat down and looked through it, and I said, oh, my God, thank God there's nothing like that here on the East Coast, And I pretty well forgot about it after that. But then going back to what Bill said, a year or two later, these, 3 or 4 years later, these In Search Of and Mystery and all these TV programs came out.
Even before that, first time I saw the PGF, I'm positive, was on a show that was on in the late 1960s called You Asked For It.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and where people would write in about certain subjects, and they do something on the subject that people would write in about it. And Bigfoot is called in the United States. Someone wrote in about it, and they featured the PGF.
So are we?
That same episode, they showed the entire second roll of film too, and that's the only time I ever saw that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So are we to assume that the only difference between North America and the rest of the world, as far as the popularity of Bigfoot or Sasquatch goes, is that Bigfoot and Sasquatch in North America was more of a media darling?
Mm-hmm.
I think so. I
Yeah.
think so.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Well, I think, I mean, you look at Australia, probably, I mean, they've had the stories of the bunny yip and Yowie, but I think if you were going to ask most Australians, probably their biggest cryptid down there would be the thylacine. And where is that? And I think again, it's part of a collective desire to say that we didn't actually drive that marsupial into extinction, but also because it's shown quite often on TV as well. We've all seen was it 1933 or 1936? I forget which picture of the last thylacine running back and forth in its little cage,
Mhm.
and I think that's what does it. Is what is in your region, historically, culturally relevant. And I don't know enough about other countries to say what they would have. Like, I don't know if the Scandinavian countries, if trolls, for example,
Mhm.
are something that comes up in their cultural relevance. I do know in New Zealand they've a lot of their cryptids are around the sea. So I think it's a lot what's culturally relevant.
Bill just lost his head.
Well, with that picture in the background, looks like he's disappearing into a wormhole.
Oh, no, let's not get on that.
My dogs always decide when I'm on this call, doing this call, that now's the perfect time to go in and out the back. And for anyone that's wondering, that picture in the background is the Sasquatch in circa 1951. So I just thought it was sort of fitting to have that up for today's show.
Oh yeah, a lick or two of paint sure makes some improvement, doesn't it? If you look at it today. Boy, oh boy, that's not bad.
Well, I was so glad in 2010 when they redid the outside of the place, because you remember the old grave building there. I remember standing outside of it when it's getting dark and watching the bats flying out of the wall. There were hundreds of them. And I said, I knew fully well, I'm going to go driving by here one morning. I'm going to see a big pile of ash. I figured that was the destiny of the Sasquatch Inn. But the people who owned it got together and decided to redo the outside and everything. And I'm certainly glad they did, because now it's a landmark I hope will be there for quite some time. And they got the best burgers in the Lower Mainland.
The best burgers.
They can make good pizza too.
Oh, yes.
Tell me something. Thomas, name a horror book that scared you to death and why.
I'm not sure about scaring me to death. The one I enjoyed the most would have to be Stephen King's second novel, Salem's Lot.
And why is that?
Because I was lucky enough to read it when it first came out, and I didn't know in advance what it was about. And the way he wrote the story, you thought he was going in one direction. And when you finally realized what was happening, you felt like you were a resident of Jerusalem's Lot. By the time you realized what was really happening, you had the sinking feeling it's too late to do much about it.
Well, I had to agree with you. I think that one certainly gets my vote as well.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why. Uh,
And the two TV movies they made about it didn't do the book justice, in my opinion. But you can't. You'd have to do a whole 10-part miniseries, each one an hour and a half long to even get close to the details Mr. King put in that book.
yeah, well, I think what got it for me was that I watched Salem's Lot, and it sort of, to me, it brought vampires up to our level, where they hobnobbed with us, socially, kind of, and there was no helpless female involved or anything like that. This time it was a kid named Danny Glick that was coming after your kids.
Yeah.
I mean, and like The Exorcist, the forces of evil sort of came to shake your hand and make your acquaintance,
Well, the whole thing was the main character, Ben Mears, is a writer who had a horrifying experience in this house in town that's got a reputation of being the local haunted house in town.
Yeah.
Because a guy named Marston used to do evil things there. And most of the middle-aged women in the timeline of the stories taking place, the mid-1970s, have very bad and at times erotic memories of the things they used to do as young women, because they're part of sort of like a witch's cult under this guy. And later on in the book, they realized that this Hubie Marston character who committed suicide after committing so many atrocities, and who everybody feared, and whose grave in the local cemetery said, his gravestone said, "God grant he lies still," had written an invitation to some noblemen in Europe inviting him to Jerusalem's Lot, and of course, with a different name, of course. And Barlow, being what he is, waiting 50 years to do so meant nothing to him, because he lives forever as long as you don't destroy him. And he shows up just at the time when this Ben Mears returns to Jerusalem to write a book about the whole childhood memory and the evils of the Marston house, just to find that the house he wanted to rent has been sold to a guy named Straker and Barlow. Nobody sees Barlow, and Straker seems to be very strange. And not only did they buy the house, they bought an antique store downtown, and Barlow and Straker antiques. And they keep saying, "Mr. Barlow's coming. Don't worry, he's on a buying trip. He's coming." And when he arrives, you really don't know what's going on. And by the time I was a third way through the book and it hit me, I actually stopped reading it and started reading it from the beginning again, because I was mad at myself because I missed the hints. But it's not that I missed anything. It's just the way King wrote the book. He wrote it in such a way that by the time you realize what's really happening, it's too late to do much about it. Because, well, you can give it away now because everyone knows. It's vampires. And Barlow is a vampire. And you wonder, well, how's Barlow even gotten there? Then you remember that Straker had them go pick up a box at the docks to bring it in at night.
Yeah.
He was in the friggin' box, And by the time he gets there, and of course, it was written in 1975, and King was really the last guy, as far as I could tell, to do the classical vampire story the way vampires were, before other authors came along and started changing the rules, like Anne Rice and, and Twilight, glistening in the sun. That kind of thing. It was
vent your grievances, Thomas.
It's like an outbreak of the plague. There's 1, then there's 2, then 4, then 8, then 16. And there's everybody is slowly being victimized. And by the time the book ends, 2/3 of the town has been changed. A quarter of the town just left because they knew something was terribly wrong. A few people came back, bought properties because of low property value, and they started to disappear, and they left. And it got to the point the town was deserted, and all the local people outside of town who were still in the area, as Mr. King wrote a sequel called One for the Road, which was a sequel about 10 years later in the early 1980s about Jerusalem's Lot. People won't say the word, but they just say, don't go near Jerusalem's Lot, especially after dark.
And that was how the woo came about.
The town went bad. That's all anyone knows. Yeah, that's all anyone knows.
Yeah.
And in the sequel story, this family during a blizzard this moron decided to take a shortcut going through Jerusalem Lot and end up getting stuck because of course no one's paving, no one's shoveling the roads or plowing the road. So he got stuck and he ended up walking back to this outside bar, and he left his wife and daughter in the car. And the story's about them going back to, of course, well, you'd have to read the story, but it was a great little sequel. It's just a short story called One for the Road that he wrote about 10 years later in the early 80s. And it's a great story about Salem's Lot. And of course, in the main story, the main vampire eventually did get destroyed, but that was far too late. And they tried to burn the town down. They burned half of it down and everything. But it's basically left, and people just don't go near the place, at least local people. And one of the big things the local people do is try to keep visitors and travelers from going there.
That was about the last of the good vampire books, as you said. Anne Rice Interview with a Vampire. It's a period piece, and so is Lestat, and so is Queen of Death, and he modernized it.
Yeah, but they changed the rules, and the big thing Anne Rice did was, in the old rules, if you were killed by a vampire, you became a vampire. Period. Right?
Yeah.
In Anne Rice's world. No, you didn't. If you were killed by a vampire, you didn't necessarily become one. They had to make you drink from them. They had to change you.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. They changed the rules. That's what I'm saying. Salem's Lot was the last book to follow the old rules.
What did you have, Bill?
Vampires is like a play. There's one, then there's two, then there's four, then there's 8. Yeah. Almost like a zombie apocalypse, really. Yeah.
Well, let's not get on zombie apocalypse. We'll be here until the apocalypse.
But that's just the way he wrote the book, and it's an awful long book, and it goes into great detail in all the characters. That's why some people think it's too drawn out.
I don't. I thought
it was excellent, but I thought
the length it was supposed to be.
At the time, it was going one way, and it just slaps you in the face when you realize what's really happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure exactly about which way it was going until a certain point. I had no preconceived ideas whatsoever. But no, one off for King. I have every book he ever wrote on the bookshelf there.
And to emphasize the difference, both miniseries changed it. Like the first 2 kids were 2 little boys who got attacked by someone when they were taking a shortcut through the woods after visiting the main kid's house. In the both miniseries, to give the impression that the little boy, the first to disappear, became a vampire and changed his brother. No, in the book, the vampire hadn't even arrived yet. He was sacrificed by Straker to lead the way, to clear the path for Barlow's arrival. It's sort of a black magic ceremony. First, he sacrificed the dog, then he sacrificed the little boy, and drawn out like that. So Ralphie Glick, the first little boy to disappear in the story, never became a vampire. He just disappeared. Yeah.
So, Bill, what is your favorite book?
Well, again, like Thomas, I haven't read a book that actually scared me. I mean, but I have found a couple of enjoyable. One that I like is called For Those Who Hunt the Night. And it's by Barbara Hambly. And Barbara Hambly is best known, I think, because she did some Star Trek books back in the day.
Yes.
And then she also did a great sword and sorcery series called the Darwath trilogy, which then eventually became 5 books. The 4th book sucks, but the first 3 and the 5th one, Ice Falcon's Quest, is great.
Yeah, I'm familiar with her name. As soon as you said it, I've read some of her stuff.
And For Those Who Hunt the Night is an interesting one. It's a period piece. It takes place in Victorian London. And what happens there is you have James Asher, who was a teaches is a linguist that teaches at Oxford University that used to be a spy in Her Majesty's service. And in London, there is something killing the old vampires of London. So one of the elder vampires of London actually coerces this James Asher to work for him to find out what's killing the old vampires of London. And it's a great book. It's probably as much a mystery book as it is horror, because it's not a lot of, there is some horror in it, but it's more about how Asher tracks down what's killing the vampires. And of course there's intrigue because Cedro, who's the vampire that's coercing James, he's sort of an outcast. He's one of the two eldest vampires in London. The other eldest vampire didn't want any humans to know that there was vampires, so they're out to also try to kill Asher if they get the opportunity. And it's a great take on the vampire legends. A little bit different.
It's a different slant, definitely.
It's a different slant, and it's also a different slant on how vampires can appear to stay youthful looking and why they hate mirrors. Like in a lot of mythology, vampires can't see themselves in mirrors, and it's because of the silver backing that used to be used in mirrors. Since silver was a holy metal, an evil creature couldn't see themselves reflected because of the silver backing. Well, for those who hunt the night, vampires continue to age their looks as they get older, but they use basically a glamour on people, so people see them and other vampires see them as they want to be seen, but they can't do it to themselves. When they actually look at a mirror, they're seeing themselves as they actually look.
Okay.
So a 500-year-old vampire looks in a mirror and sees this decaying old 500-year-old.
So we're doing the picture of Dorian Gray kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's good fun. It's a short book. It's no novel by any means, but she did a couple of series in there. She did For Those Who Hunt the Night, which I said is really good. Traveling with the Dead, which I'm not hugely fussy on. And then there's a third book, which I haven't read, which my daughter's read, that she says is quite good.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And then, like I said, for anyone that likes, the sword and sorcery type, the Darwath series is really good. And that's almost a different take on vampire, except for it's in a parallel universe, and it's not so much vampires, it's almost you almost say giant amoebas. I mean, they're big and they attack at night, and they have a lot of the similarities to the vampire legends. They can't come out in day, and it's a sword and sorcery, and it's a great trilogy.
Yeah, I like sword and sorcery. I'm sure I have one of Hamley's books in the bookcase too. I'm just racking my brains trying to think of the title. And I was heavily into sword and sorcery back then, so she's in that category. Yeah, I think. Well, for me, it had to be mentioned sooner or later. My book. I was 20 years old, I think, when I read it. It had just come out, and it was turning the world upside down in a way. And that's William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist. I read that book, and it had very, very scary moments in it. If you're, sitting in the house by yourself with a lively imagination at 1 o'clock in the morning, wanting to finish this thing and yet afraid to stop reading to go to bed, I got a very vivid imagination, by the way. And I thought it was so interesting because it wasn't anything like monsters and monster movies. It wasn't anything like even Stephen King, where you got a psychological thriller in your hands. It's like, does real evil exist? Is it possible that real evil, pure evil, exists? I remember at the time I was reading it, that the Catholic Church was all up in arms about it. The Vatican lied about not having any exorcists on the payroll. They did. And they even said there's no such thing as exorcism anyway, because, and for that reason, I had to love the book, being a non-practicing Catholic anymore. I said, okay, I'm on Blatty's side, bring it on. And I'm not sure if I'm explaining it right, but it made you feel like the gate was open, so you could look at good and evil as being orchestrated by higher powers. Maybe that's a cop-out. Maybe what I'm talking about, not taking responsibility for your own actions now, because I know after that movie came out, not the book, after the book came out, yes, even then, there was many a claim of innocence in courts where people said the devil made me do it as an excuse for whatever crimes they committed. That's where that came from, that saying, the devil made me do it. It came after Blatty's book was released. And it was a real battle, because it wasn't a Universal Monsters being glued together anymore. It was something nebulous, but it was there. It was a possibility that it was there. I mean, there's no way to disprove it.
I think it got you with that visceral fear. It was, the book was I agree, the book was unsettling in a completely different way than most books that our generation would have read before it. I think you nailed it on the head. I think that was probably the scariest movie of all time. And I don't think movies are generally scary, but I think
no,
if it's not the scariest movie of all time, it's right up there.
I can't remember the last movie that ever scared me. Really, I must have been a teenager or something at the time, because as an adult, I've never come across, except for The Exorcist, a movie or a book that sort of opened its jaws and just swallowed me. I mean, I was a victim of the book. I had to read the book from cover to cover. I couldn't chicken out. I couldn't back down. I had to see where this was going. And man, it was quite a trip, that book. And the movie was quite a trip too. I think when we talk about movies, that might be my choice to talk about as well, book and movie, because I can't think of any other book that so profoundly affected my outlook on good and evil, religion, and the whole ball of wax. So
one thing that impressed me about the movie The Exorcist is I actually read the book after I saw the movie, and I was quite impressed at how well and closely the movie followed the book.
Exactly. And
usually I'm disappointed how they trail away from the book, but they didn't. And The Exorcist, they followed the book pretty damn close.
Well, the thing is about that, I'm talking about the book now, not the movie, so I won't say much more, is that you're right. It was very close to the book, and that's what made it so very scary. I think the movie itself only omitted probably 2 scenes that ended up on the cutting room floor. And they didn't have they weren't missed in the movie because there was already enough horror going around anyway. And so anyway, that was it for me, The Exorcist. And I wish I had a copy here. I'd read it again to see if it has the same kind of eye-opening, profound effect. Because it made me question religion and the Catholic Church and Satan worship, the whole. Yes, I went through my cult period too, and all of that. But I mean, it was an eye opener. It made me interested in this stuff. It made me interested in going out and finding out what the Wicca was about, what supernatural was about, what Anton LaVey was doing in San Francisco with the first Church of Satan, and on and on and on. And that was my little cult phase before I picked up Japanese samurai.
And I think the other thing with the what was so disturbing about it for the time, I think, and you guys are a little bit older than me, not much, because I'm 56, but when that book came out, I think that was the first book that I could recall where the person that was in danger to that degree was a child. And I think that was the same with the movie, because usually it was, a woman that was in trouble, or maybe an old man, but with both the book and the movie, the target of the evil was a child. And I think that affected a lot of people, because children used to be sort of taboo. You didn't go after them in the movies or the books, and this one really did.
And the book, another book I couldn't put down, and my parents had a bit bad effect on them too when they read it, because I got it when it first came out, was the Amityville Horror, because at the time they were saying it was a true story.
Yes, the Lutz family.
Yeah. And I couldn't put that book down. I remember my father at the cottage up in Lake St. Peter, he was reading it. And every time he had to get up to go to the bathroom, he was turning on every light.
I know.
I never did that before. And my mother did the same thing.
It is another one of those books that suck you in right from the first chapter. You got to see what happens to these poor people.
I now think it was the biggest con story, one of the biggest publishing con stories ever done. But
it was, because
it was really, really, really good.
It was really good
story, yeah.
And like you were saying, whenever I went into a dark room, I looked for shining pig's eyes in the window too. I mean, the pig in the basement in a well, that just got to me. I don't know.
If I go in a room, there's more than 4 or 5 flies flying around, I start to wonder.
Yeah. So, what movie would you pick, Thomas?
One of my favorite, not because of, but just the atmosphere of it, is I always had a fascination as well growing up with ghost stories, and just ghost stories in general. Not necessarily horror stories, but a good ghost story.
Yeah.
So when it comes to movies, my favorite ghost story has got to be the 1963 version of The Haunting, based on the book The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. That movie was, in my opinion, outstanding. And it still holds today, because one of the biggest mistakes they do today, and they did it with the remake, they tried to remake The Haunting in the mid-90s with Liam Neeson, and
that was a disaster.
It was terrible, because they went overboard with, the bedroom tries to eat her and she still doesn't believe in ghosts. But, the original, it was more like what a real haunting is like, and it was just outstanding. It was more the tension than anything else. You're looking at the poster of the remake there. Yeah,
crap. The remake.
That's the remake. Crap.
That's the crap one.
That's the crap one. You want the 1963 one? Yeah.
Well, you know what got me about that movie was done in black and white. The special effects were astounding. The camera work was amazing. And you really believe these people were in deep doo-doo. Yeah. You really did. Because it's about a bunch of paranormal ghost hunters and whatnot who want to spend time in a haunted house because it's supposed to be haunted.
Yeah, the professor was out to prove the existence of life after death, and that's why they were there. And this one woman who was played by Julie Harris, whose character was absolutely annoying. I mean, she just bellyached all the time. But she seemed to be the main focus of the attention of the house. A woman named Eleanor, who spent most of her life taking care of her very mean, dying mother. And this was her first chance to get away and actually do something. And what does she do? She ends up going with paranormal research to a haunted house in New England. Hill House, a house that was born bad.
And thank God it was made in the 50s because they didn't have
Yeah.
light meters as they
Yeah.
wandered around looking for
Yeah.
coal zones.
And it just grabs you. Like the first paragraph of the book.
Oh, yeah.
First paragraph, I've almost memorized it. An evil old house, the kind some call haunted, is like an undiscovered country waiting to be born. Hill House has stood for 90 years and may stand for 90 more. Silence lay steady against the wood and stone of Hill House, and whatever walks there walks alone.
We'll make a campfire, Bill. I'll get the schmockers. Yeah, wow. That's almost as good as the Boneless Men Without Bones. Yeah. But but that's a must-see horror flick. If you ever get a chance on Netflix or Prime or wherever, you download it from Pirate Bay, whatever. If they have any feeders there, you must really do it because these guys were quite unprepared for what they ran into in that house. Mm-hmm. And like I said, the special effects, all these guys had were their convictions and their belief in what they believed was possible and what wasn't and what could be possible, blah, blah, blah. It was quite a story. It was, The Haunting, yeah, man, right till this day, it's got to be up there in the top 3 movies ever made. The original one, the black and white one.
The Haunting, 1963. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you have a movie, Bill?
Yeah, one of my favorite. This goes back. The backstory is, I was growing up. I never had sort of like don't watch this or don't watch that for my dad or my mom. And when I was 7, I watched Vincent Price's old Scream and Scream Again. And
I've never heard of it.
Oh, it was one of the old, not sure if it was Hammer, but it was one of those series that he did. And it's not the greatest movie that goes on all time, but I was 7 years old when I watched it. And part of it, you have this jogger that he was running down the road and had heart attack like symptoms. And it shows that he's in the hospital and he's all freaked out. He's going, nurse, nurse, nurse. And the nurse comes in and she's sort of ignoring him. And he throws off his sheet and one of his legs have been amputated. And he's freaked out about this. And then the nurse basically puts the anesthetic in his mouth. Movie goes on for a little while later, and there's what they think is a vampire out there that's killing people at the same time. Then it goes back to this guy in the hospital room, and he's freaking out, similar sort of thing. And this time, both legs are missing.
Okay.
Then, of course, and then it's a little later, it's, and at the same time, they're looking for this vampire that's out there. And then he has an arm missing. And then he's there with both arms missing. And then it shows.
It's starting to sound like a Monty Python skit,
and then it shows him throwing a headless torso into a vat of acid. And in the end, it wasn't a real vampire. It was a serial killer out there that was using basically a big 2-pronged fork to stab into the neck of his victims to make them bleed out and make it look like it was a vampire. But
wasn't Peter Cushing in that too?
I can't remember. I was, like I said, I was only 7 at the time. That was in my life probably the only movie that really scared me. And then, as I got older, it was like you saw, okay, it's a pretty cheesy movie. It's not like if you were to watch it now.
Yeah, wasn't there one scene when they thought they caught the vampire and they had him handcuffed to the bumper of the car, and he ends up getting away and they realize he pulled his hand off and it's still hanging from the bumper of the handcuff. Yeah. I remember that movie. Yeah.
But with me, like with horrors, like I love the cheesy ones. Like I'm not a great one for. Like if you want to watch slasher movies, Hostel, Jigsaw or Saw or any of those type, I'm not interested. I'm not interested in the slasher type. I've watched the Rob Zombie movies. I've watched You know, all the
Yeah.
Halloween and Friday 13th.
Yeah.
They don't do anything for me. They bore the hell out of me, to be quite honest. But I do like, you want to throw on a bad Bruce Campbell movie on there. You know, Alien Apocalypse, probably, I mean, it's not even a B movie. It's probably a D or an E movie. Stupid as all hell. I'll watch it.
Dead don't
You know,
die.
For me, I'm much the same. But I remember watching a show as a kid. I was probably about 12, 13 years old, scared the dickens out of me at the time. Old black and white, and it fits in with our theme, black and white movie called The Abominable Snowman. Peter Cushing, Forrest Tucker, and some forgettable actor.
That's the movie I
It
watched.
scared the hell out of me. When the injured guy was in the tent, and this leathery hand full of fur on top comes in and grabs the gun and starts twisting it, and the other guys come and scare it off. And at the end, when Peter Cushing is in the cave and two of them come into the cave after him, and the lights were just shining on their eyes, you know. I thought that was the scariest thing. I saw it again about 2 weeks ago on Netflix. I said, this has to be one of the dumbest movies ever made. I mean, styrofoam for snowbanks, props that were made out of plastic. Oh my God.
When I was a kid, I should have been asleep and I walked in. My parents were watching.
That was the one?
That was the one. The Abominable Snowman, the Himalayas, it was called. Yeah.
Oh
Peter
my
Cushing and
God.
Forrest Tucker, yeah.
You should be taking some kind of therapy or something for that, man. Because to subject a child to that is unusual behavior by any stretch. That was the dumbest, hokiest. And the Tibetan lamas, I don't know what they were about. I could never figure it out. And it was a wild, macabre ride over hill and dale as they searched for these abominable snowmen.
I still think Peter Cushing was based on Peter Byrne, and Forrest Tucker was supposed to be that Texas millionaire Tom Slick.
Slick. Oh yeah, that could very well be. It was much like that, wasn't it? It was much like that. Yeah, change it from Antarctica to India or something, and you got a story going. Yeah.
Oh, Himalayas, Nepal, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. I don't recall in all the years, and I watch bad monster movies and I watch bad horrors. I mean, I'm a huge Godzilla fan. You know, all those old Hammer films, like you were talking earlier, love them. But you know, I don't think I've ever seen a good Sasquatch horror film.
No,
I know a lot of people like Exist.
No such thing.
You know, Exist, I thought was a stupid movie. As much the one that Bobcat Goldthwait directed. What do you like it, Thomas?
Who directed it?
Bobcat Goldthwait. You know, it's the one Bluff Creek. Where you don't know at the end if it was a Sasquatch or a psycho.
Willow Creek.
Willow Creek.
Mm.
You know, I've never seen a good Sasquatch one. I think Willow Creek was stupid. I thought, you know, Exist, which is another one a lot of people like, was stupid.
I have to disagree with you there, Bill, because I saw one that scared the heck out of me the first 3 times I saw it. And that was the Legend of Boggy Creek.
Oh, that one, I will say, I forgot about that one. I loved that one. The Legend of Boggy Creek I loved it. And the other one that I did like was a movie, and it's not a great movie, but it was just because I like bad movies, was The Creature from Black Lake.
Yeah, the unofficial sequel to Legend of Boggy Creek.
Well, it had Jackie Lamb in there, and Jackie Lamb was one of my
Tarzan.
No, Jack
Elam, yes.
Yeah, the old Western character actor.
Yeah.
No, but like, if you want to see a really bad Sasquatch movie,
there's so many.
Yeah, watch Hoax.
Hoax,
okay. and watch it right to the bitter end, because as the movie's going along, it sort of rides to the edge where it could be a good movie
Uh-huh.
or a bad movie. And then right at the end, you're thinking, oh, okay, it's not bad. And then they have a plot twist in the very last scene. And you go, what the hell did I just watch? I just wasted 2 hours of my life.
I think the worst Sasquatch cheap horror film I ever saw was one made in the late 70s called Snow Beast.
Oh, yeah.
It was
Yeah.
awful. Just awful. And it was one of the, it's supposed to be the Sasquatch view all the time, and it's kind of another cheap takeoff of Jaws, I guess. Ski Lodge, the guy who played Buford Pussers, and then Walking Tall movies was in it. And Cliff Walker was in it, the guy who was a good actor in the movie Night of the Grizzly back in the 50s, back in the day, but he was in it. And all about this, you got this mayor and this who's running this town lodge, and she's all wants this winter carnival to go off, and she's determined to keep it going even though skiers are starting to disappear. And of course, the winter carnival is nothing but a school gymnasium with a couple of tables and banners on top of it. It was a really cheap movie.
Oh well, they had the same thing. I forget the name of it. They just moved it from the mountains to the ocean. They had this big fair going on in the ocean because it was going to revive the town, and the mayor was, steadfast, in favor.
The only thing of the creature you saw was shots of the face was about to attack somebody. That the person going, there's this big hairy hand goes.
Another real.
That's a pretty cheap bad guy. One hand.
Snow Beast.
Snow Beast.
Another real bad one was called Bigfoot, and it had Danny Bonaduce from the
I heard about that. I never saw that one, but I heard about it.
Well, he's playing a DJ that's doing old 80s rock, that's trying to do a rock festival in this little town. And of course, when he's doing it, there's a Bigfoot going around killing people.
Uh-huh.
But this thing is like, well, it's big enough that it stomps people to death, and the feet are about the size of the person.
Don't call him Bigfoot for nothing.
So, I mean, the thing's got to be, 40 feet tall, 50 feet tall. And I remember there's one scene in it.
Sounds like it's from Alberta.
There's one scene in it where this guy's in a little Zodiac, and the water's in a stream, and the water's probably 2 feet deep. And all of a sudden you hear this boom, boom, as the Bigfoot's walking towards the guy. The guy's, instead of getting out and running like hell, he's trying to paddle this boat in like 2 feet of water to get away from this thing. It just comes and stomp.
Just like Bambi.
I've heard about this one. I have never seen it.
Well, now you don't have to.
No, I don't have to.
We only got so many years left in our lives, man. Pick them wisely.
I'll tell you, if you have a Roku device or a Roku smart TV, and you have Kodi, which is you can have on the computer or on your Roku, you have Kodi, Netflix, and Amazon Prime, you can watch more bad horror films.
Oh man, schlock, pure schlock, as they used to say back in the 70s.
Yeah.
Yep, just type in Sasquatch, man, and you see the list of titles coming up that you could watch right now at your fingertips.
Well, they're probably the easiest schlock movie to make on a budget. You basically need one bad costume, some trees somewhere. That's about it.
Well, that's it.
And you get 4 or 5 girls with nice big boobs, your victims.
There you go. Fresh meat.
Horror movie. Yeah.
Fresh meat. Yeah, bring on the meat.
Yeah.
No, for me, with movies again, I'm sorry to get sidetracked on Sasquatch, of all things on these podcasts for me to talk about. I apologize for talking about Sasquatch. Yeah. But for me, again, the movie is same as the book, The Exorcist.
Mm-hmm.
And for reasons, one of which you mentioned, the movie stuck right to the book. Very few of them do. but it stuck right with the book. And it had a bunch of B-list actors because nobody in Hollywood wanted to touch it, even though Blatty had a million seller with the book.
Which movie are you talking about now?
The Exorcist.
Oh, okay.
No actor in Hollywood wanted to touch it. No director or producer wanted anything to do with it. So that's why nobody famous, really famous, appears in it. I mean, Anne Bancroft or somebody was in it. That's about it. And at that time, she was a B actor at that time.
Who was the old priest? He was a famous actor.
Max von Sydow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But you know, how many movies did he appear in? I mean, he was getting pretty well up there in those days. Yeah. But you know, but from the first few minutes of the movie, man, you know that no mere mortals could fix this one.
And when it comes to
this movie, was heavy duty stuff.
I always remember.
I mean, it would take
the first sequel to The Exorcist, The Exorcist 2. It was a piece of crap.
Oh yeah,
The Exorcist 3 with George C. Scott was the first real true sequel to the first movie, and it was pretty damn good as well. Yeah.
But I mean, the Exorcist. I mean, I got to give it props for the special effects. They were amazing.
Back in the
I am telling you, you will never watch this movie, and you'll never look at pea soup again. I can tell you that because Linda Blair doing a 360-degree pirouette with her head, power puking green pea soup out of her mouth. That's not a thing you soon forget.
I can't get over there's a woman who did the demon voices. And I can't remember her name. She just passed away very recently. And she said she chain smoked 3 packs of cigarettes a day to do the voice. And there was another guy who did the voice because sometimes it was a male Englishman, like, you know what your blank daughter is doing, you know, when her head spun. That was a guy who did that one. But the woman who mainly did the voice of the demon out of Linda Blair.
You know, I think you hit the nail on the head there when you said that what really got the people about it, that it was a child, a female child.
Yeah.
You know, it's not stated. It's not stated, but you sort of figure out that's exactly what the demon wanted.
And apparently,
because he knew it would take something like that to get Karis out of retirement, so they could have their last battle together.
I think the author of the book was a guy named Peter Benchley.
Blatty,
okay.
Yeah, William Peter Blatty.
Okay. And he apparently based the story on an actual exorcism that was actually a young man, rather than a woman. Yeah.
And I think that took place in the Middle East.
I thought it was Germany, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, the thing that got me about it is the great lengths that the Catholic Church, as I said, went through to poo-poo this movie, saying there's no such thing, no exorcism has ever happened. And yes, they do have rules for exorcism, but, you know, to become an exorcist, you've got to be practically in sainthood, you know, and you got to go through rigorous courses and training and everything like that.
Well, before I ever really I was able to get involved in the Sasquatch mystery in the late 70s there. I spent some time with some other high school kids that were interested, actually doing some investigation in alleged haunted houses in the Toronto area. You know, I went and visited them.
That sounds cool. You know, I mean, we poo-poo paranormal and everything here, but I know all three of us have a definite interest in the paranormal and such like that.
When I got to Calgary, I around Halloween time, I visited the Dean House and the Prince House and Heritage Park and all the other supposed haunted buildings. And I remember that Heritage Park's official policy was deny. Anytime any stories of any sightings of ghosts in the Prince House or something would come in, they would deny. And I thought I would play. I think I played a part in it. And I remember this is the early to mid 80s now. I said, "Why are you always denying it? You should push it. Have haunted house tours around Halloween time. Publish a little pamphlet or something on the haunted stories. Push it. It's another attraction. Because you stand outside the main gate of the Prince House. What are people and listening to the people talk as they enter it? What are they talking about? Are they talking about the Victorian history? Are they talking about the Victorian architecture? No, they're talking about ghosts,
Yeah.
and that's why they're there.
Everybody loves ghosts.
Yeah. So, and that's what they did. Now, Heritage Park, at least what I heard, has annual around this time of year has haunted house tours because half the buildings in the place have a history of hauntings in them, and they've published a little book, Ghost Stories of Heritage Park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish they had a good paranormal program on television instead of the garbage, those programs that are made in Britain and in the States.
The thing I like about them, and there was one that was on, and it was Linda Blair.
The sound is over there. Why are you going that way? Go that way.
The point I'm trying to make is the woman who hosted was the little woman who was the little medium for the movie Poltergeist.
Yeah.
And they didn't have to do a damn thing. They actually went to real buildings with real histories, like the Tower of London, like Edinburgh Castle, like in Britain. And they didn't have to do a thing. People would go in there at night, and just the sound of the normal sounds a house makes at night were freaking them out.
Mm-hmm.
They were spooking themselves. They didn't have to fake anything. It's just the way the atmosphere, and they're so tensed up that a door shutter banging in the wind made them jump out of their skin. It was hilarious. I can't remember what the show was called, but it was hosted by Linda Blair. And the woman who narrated it was the little woman who's passed away, the little actress who was the medium in the movie Poltergeist.
Yeah, well, what got me is that you got these paranormalists, and they're in there to investigate to find out if the claims are real or not. And the first slightest bit of evidence have them screaming and running in the opposite direction.
My first thought is, why are you going in there at night when you can't see anything?
Yeah, bring a light with you, String up a string of lights in a generator.
Yeah.
So, just rolling back a bit, I'm going to bring up 3 points. The first two are about The Exorcist. One, I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but Linda Blair starred in a parody of The Exorcist called Repossessed, which supposedly took place 20 years after the exorcism.
Really? I was not aware of that.
Yeah, and
wasn't that The Exorcist 2?
No, it was called Repossessed, and it was a spoof.
Oh, okay.
And it had
just the title will tell you that.
It had he starred in The Naked Gun.
Leslie Nielsen?
Yeah.
Leslie Nielsen,
He plays the old priest.
Oh God, here we go. Yeah.
It's a funny movie. The second point on The Exorcist is when you talk about impact, I had a cousin who at the time The Exorcist was in her 30s, and she was not a well person.
Mm-hmm.
And she went to see The Exorcist in the movie theater, and she was actually convinced after seeing it that she was possessed, and she actually had a little stay in Essendale to help her through it. So a lot of people forget when you're talking about the impact of The Exorcist that it had some severe repercussions on some people that were not the most stable. And
I have to tell you, Bill, that you're absolutely correct. I mean, people lost sight of the fact that when this thing first played, the movie in New York and places like that, had premieres, there were people having heart attacks. There were people falling down in the aisles. There were ambulances coming to theaters. There were people that, within the first half hour of the movie just left virtually shrieking. I know this sounds like an old pitch from the 50s about a movie that you must see because
Jerry,
I mean, this is actual truth. This had terrible.
Jerry, I heard that too. And I remember seeing stories on the news about that, and showed this woman crying, lying down. Her boyfriend had to take her out of the picture because it was too much for her. But I went to see The Exorcist with my girlfriend, and I saw nobody get sick or run out. So,
well, I can just say with my aunt, or sorry, my cousin, and again, she wasn't a stable person. She had mental issues her whole life, but she, for whatever reason, decided to go see that film,
Yeah, it was the wrong film for her to see.
Yeah,
That
and it was and I mean
definitely.
so I mean there was people affected.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing, if you ever get the chance to watch this paranormal series, it only lasted one season, and it was on Newfie TV. It was called Newfoundland Paranormal,
Hmm.
and they went to old buildings in Newfoundland and they did investigations. And part of why I think it only lasted one season is they did. It's like what if you went to a Sasquatch research,
Yeah,
if you did what we actually did, it would only last a
that's
season.
right. That's
Because
right.
when these people went in, if they went into a building and nothing happened, you had a half-hour show of them doing things and nothing happened. And one of my favorite was they were in this old, and I can't remember the whole uh, order. It was either a monastery first that then burnt down and became a hotel that burnt down and became a tavern, or it was one or the other. But it had burnt down twice, but it had been one of those three type of buildings every time. So you had the older guy. He's down in the basement where there's supposed to be a shadow person, and he's down there and he's just drinking a cup of tea, and he's having tea, talking to the camera, and something happens, and he goes, "Are you disturbing my tea? How rude!" And then he listens, and nothing more happens. And it was like you think about it, you go, "Well, that's dumb." Well, it was a real investigation. Like I remember they were at a lighthouse where some strange things happened, and it was more believable because when you watched all their shows, if nothing happened,
Nothing
that's what you
happened.
saw. And they told you at
Yeah.
the end, we can't say that this is a haunted house or not because nothing happened when we were here.
And that's exactly the reason they were killed. You're
Yep.
absolutely correct. That's why that show was knifed. Did you ever see the pilot that myself and John Kirk and Thomas, who was with us, Adam, or was it
Barry
Zeb?
Blunt, the late Barry Blunt.
No. Before Barry Blunt ever came along, it was Sebastian. Was it Sebastian or Adam came out to the island with us? Myself, you, John Kirk. I think it was Sebastian.
Oh, could have been. Yeah, can't remember. Nothing ever came of that show.
Anyway, we made. You must have a copy there. Have you seen it, Bill?
No, never have.
You should see it because it was going to be an anthology type thing, and we were going to be going every week to visit a different person who filed a report and to interview them about that report and show the area where the report took place. And we talked to this lady from Half Moon Bay, and she was fantastic. And we put it in the can, brought it back, went to the Toronto Film Festival or whatever it was. And Bobo and the gang beat us out because that was the year they started In Search of Bigfoot or whatever. So they blew us out of the water. But this is exactly like what you're talking about. We interviewed this person. She told us the story. She showed us where it happened. We talked to family members on camera, the whole deal. And it was excellent. It showed the reality of being a Sasquatch researcher, you know. It showed what it's actually like going out into the field and talking to people and everything. There was no sensationalism involved whatsoever. And
which is why they probably rejected it.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's just like this podcast, you know, not everybody's cup of tea. Give me a monster story.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's taken for granted. You know,
I told them right at the beginning, we will not do any hoaxing or dramatization that's not true.
Yeah.
And
well, next time Bill is over, you should dig it out and play it for him.
I don't have it. I only saw a bit of it.
Really?
I never got a piece of it. If I do, I got it on DVD somewhere. But no, I never got it. I was shown a bit of it, and as far as I knew, it was never I never saw the finished product.
Oh, I got it here.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. It's on DVD.
Mhm.
I'm currently on stick, so I got no way to watch it anyway, unless I.
Well, next time I visit, you can show it.
But yes, most certainly. I know I would have played it a long time ago. I thought you'd seen it many a time, but anyway, yeah, it's too bad as sensationalism sells, as they say, and when the truth becomes legend, print a legend, according to Mark Twain, and smart fellow, Mr. Twain. Yeah.
Most thing about that case I remember is at the time, the little girl, well, she's a 13-year-old teenager when we were there, but when it happened, she was just a little girl. Her mother never thought for years that she'd even seen it. And all of a sudden she said one day, Mommy, what about that big monk that we saw across the road? And you did see it. Yeah.
Kids are wonderful.
Yeah.
Kids are wonderful. So, Bill, what are you dressing up as Halloween?
Maybe what I'll do,
You're only sharing it with a few hundred people, not many. So,
put on these glasses,
Oh,
put
yeah.
on my daughter's Santa hat, and I think I'd make a jolly good fellow.
You'd make a jolly good fellow. Oh, God. What about you, Thomas? I see you got your pumpkin behind you, ready to be carved.
Yeah, I've always carved a jack-o'-lantern because the tradition in Halloween is the jack-o'-lantern protects you from the bad spirits at night. So I keep following the tradition because I haven't had a trick-or-treater around here in 21 years.
That's because of your nature.
Yeah, more like people kind of avoid me.
After we go off the air with this, it'll be Thomas over there with the carving knife. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who knows what darkness lurks in the heart of men.
Remember the old mansion that was across the street from me in my old address, the Catherwood mansion? Catherwood told me, Pat Catherwood told me, he said, you got to stop talking to stories. We're spending a fortune on cam. We're not getting any kids anymore. The reason why they weren't getting any kids is because I was telling them stories about that house. Don't go near the Catherwood house. Oh, you don't want to go there. Bad things happen at the Catherwood house.
But if you do go there and come back, share your candy with me.
Yeah, that's why I always said that the house is gone now. They just tore it down a couple of years ago, but the old Catherwood house was sort of like a little mansion right on Highway 7. I always thought if they ever did a film version of Salem's Lot, Hatchick would be a perfect fill-in for the town, and the Catherwood house would be the Marston house. It was perfect. Would have been great. Yeah.
On that note, we'll leave Thomas with his lively imagination, and Bill has to go practice his ho, 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 ho. He got the wrong holiday, but there's no point in talking to him. Can't wait to see what he dresses like at Christmas.
Like I said, one of my favorite things, especially around Halloween time, we ever went and had a camp out, their kids along, was tell them the story about the men without bones.
The men without bones.
Yeah. Because if you can't traumatize kids in a camping trip or in Halloween, what's the point of having them?
Well, absolutely. You're going to have to do on a podcast. You're going to have to do men without bones.
Men without bones.
Yeah, because that is your forte.
When you're camping late at
night. I heard you tell that about 10 years ago, and I've never forgotten it. Never. Men without bones.
Men without bones. My uncles terrified me of that with a story when I was a kid. I've passed on it today. When you're camping late at night, keep your fire burning bright because they don't like it in the light. The men without bones.
We'll have to film it around the campfire one night, Thomas.
Yeah, even if it's a propane campfire, whatever we can get going. Yeah. Gentlemen, thank you for coming out this night before All Hallow Eve and spreading some mirth and joy among friends and foes alike. It was a good talk, guys. Appreciate it. We have to do it again soon, of course. Intrepid, Thomas Steenberg, it's been a pleasure. Ingenious buddy, Bill, it's been an absolute pleasure.
What's that?
That's right. That's right. There we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's time to fade to black. It's time to fade to black.
The voices in Thomas's head are coming out.
Oh my God. I'm out of here. Thank you, guys.
Have a good one.
Happy Halloween.
Ashes, ashes, we are